What's going on, you guys? My name's Ty Knots, and welcome to Top 5 Unknowns, 5 greatest scary Netflix documentaries. Number 5. Back in 2015, a documentary film was released by the name The Possession of Janet Moses. The film tells the tragic story of Janet, who was receiving an exorcism back in 2007, but drowned in the process. Janet was a 22-year-old woman from New Zealand. At the time of her passing, she was allegedly held down and had water forced down her throat, according to court reports. Police sought to prosecute 9 of her family members for their involvement in the crime that was part of a Maori curse-lifting ritual, taking place over the course of 3 days. Janet was a mother of 2 and was surrounded by family during the entire event. They had surrounded her in a so-called circle of love as they attempted to flush evil spirits and demons from her body, screaming for these supposed demons to leave their presence. One officer stated that several of the family members placed their mouths over her eyes and began sucking on her eyes in an attempt to remove the curse somehow. This is seriously one of the strangest exorcisms I've personally ever heard of. Police say that if she resisted in any way, they would become more aggressive toward her, making her suffering far worse than it already was. According to her family, the exorcism was in response to Janet stealing a concrete lion cub about 2 weeks earlier. In total, 5 of her 9 family members were found guilty for their crimes, though they only served time as community service. According to witnesses, another 14-year-old girl was also harmed during the same ritual, after people allegedly saw demons in her eyes and attempted to claw them out. The film debuted in late 2015 and is a combination of witness testimonies and reenacted scenes from the exorcism. The director of the film says that after being so deeply involved in the case, he found it hard to blame the family members because they genuinely believed that their daughter was cursed and believed that what they were doing would actually help her. The film helps to shed light on their thought process and what exactly was going through their minds at the time of the attack. He says that it was important for the film to tell an accurate message of the love that the family members had for her, rather than simply being a hit piece targeted at someone else's belief system. Number 4. Netflix released a docuseries back in 2017 known as The Keepers, which tells the story of the unsolved murder of a nun known as Sister Kathy. Kathy was a sister of the Catholic Church who taught English and drama at an all-girls high school. Her body was discovered back in 1970 near a dump in a small suburban area. Still to this day, her crimes remain unsolved, though the cause of her passing has been determined to have been a hemorrhage caused by a skull fracture. Around the time of her disappearance, she'd concluded teaching at her school in 1969. She left her apartment that she shared with another member of the church in order to purchase a gift for a friend's engagement party. Police say that she cashed her paycheck at a nearby bank and made a small purchase at a baker close by. This was the last time that anyone had seen her alive, and her body was discovered 3 months later, in January of 1970, by a hunter who was traveling nearby the landfill. Her car was then found illegally parked just across the street from her apartment complex, and was covered in mud. To this day, no one can determine a motive for the crime, other than a potential robbery. However, it has since come to light that a priest at her school and church may have somehow been involved. Several students and workers have come out against the man in the early 90s, alleging that he had subjected many of the females around him to sexual abuse and had even been involved in trafficking rings. No physical evidence was found to tie the priest to the case, and the case was ultimately dropped. In 2016, it was determined that the church had been paying off his victims in order to keep their silence. There's certainly no definitive proof that the priest was involved in any way, though he's the only known suspect with any real reason to take Kathy's life, as she was found to have known about the abuse that he'd been subjecting these girls to, and likely had been subjected to abuse of her own. Her case remains unsolved, though investigations are still ongoing all these years later. Number 3. In 2018, Netflix released a documentary with the lengthy title of Evil Genius: The True Story of America's Most Diabolical Bank Heist. The film tells the infamous story of a pizza delivery man named Brian Wells, who was determined to have robbed a bank. Back in 2003, he was seen on TV sitting cross-legged in front of a police car, with a metal collar wrapped around his neck. The collar had been rigged to a bomb, with his accomplices in the crime holding the detonator switch. According to numerous reports, Brian thought the bomb was fake and all for show. However, his accomplices had swapped the bomb for a real one and exchanged it without Brian's knowledge. Brian was forced to go to a nearby bank and demanded $250,000. Police arrived before he could escape with the funds, and in CCTV video, Brian is seen sitting in front of a cop car when the collar detonated, leaving behind an unimaginably graphic disaster. Police eventually found the list of tasks that Brian had been given and determined that it would have been physically impossible for him to have completed the task in the amount of time that his accomplices allotted. They had no intentions of him ever walking away a free man, and had essentially given this man a death sentence. 2 men were eventually charged in the case and sentenced to life in prison. Number 2. To be perfectly honest with you guys, I'm not 100% certain how to pronounce this next film, so we'll call it Voyeur and hope that that's correct. The documentary was released by Netflix in 2017 and was directed by Miles Kane and Josh Corey. The film has a very simple plot, and it's difficult for me to share much of it with you without spoiling the entire documentary. An iconic journalist known as Gay Tallies broke the story of a man known as Gerald Foos, who owns a motel located in Colorado. Gerald had been allegedly spying on his visitors of the motel through the ceiling vents above the rooms, and had even built a so-called observation platform in the attic of the building so that he could more quietly watch his guests without their knowledge. Gerald stated that he only ever did this so as to conduct research regarding different people's sexual behaviors. However, I think it's pretty clear what his intentions truly were in all of this. The film received largely positive reviews and was covered by several major news outlets and news websites. It does a great job of getting you involved in the story, rather than feeling as though you're simply watching a news broadcast, as many documentaries are known to do. It's available now on Netflix, so be sure to give it a watch. Number 1. Audrey and Daisy is a documentary film distributed by Netflix, which tells the tragedy of 2 young girls who were subjected to unspeakable sexual abuse. The 2 young high school girls, named Audrey Pott and Daisy Coleman, were just 14 and 15 years old at the time of the crimes. The assaults were carried out on these girls, and afterward, to make matters much worse, both they and their families were subjected to severe cyberbullying, making the terrifying ordeal seem as though it had no end. The perpetrators haunted every aspect of these young girls' lives. Audrey was eventually led to take her own life after the horrible abuse, with the documentary telling in terrifying detail exactly how the cases and crimes unfolded. I certainly won't get into any major details here, as the story is extremely graphic and I'm sure triggering for many of you. The film premiered in January of 2016 and was purchased by Netflix shortly thereafter and released for streaming in September of that same year. It received largely positive reviews and even won a Peabody Award in 2017. It's certainly a film worth checking out, but seriously, if this is the type of content that's triggering for you, you may just want to sit this one out. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, be sure to click that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep updated with our videos.